Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining this week's session on appropriate technologies for smallholder farmers in organics and agroecology in our Southern African region and across our continent. My name is Frances Davies, and I work with the Knowledge Hub for Organic Agriculture in Southern Africa, which is part of a continental-wide project called the KHSA, the Knowledge Centre for Organic Agriculture in Africa. And the KHSA has been hosting a series of webinars that I think many people have joined already in the last 3 weeks. And this is our 4th webinar, and we will have one more in this particular series coming up next week. So we're really excited to have both of our speakers here with us today, looking at this very complicated topic about what is appropriate technologies for smallholders in Africa. And technologies are a very big debate and a buzzword in Africa at the moment, and particularly with climate change, with biodiversity, with the nutrition crisis we face. And so we keep on hearing about technologies. So what do technologies really mean? And what does this mean in the context of smallholder farmers and in local development that really supports local initiatives, local growth? What does this mean actually for local communities? What kind of technologies are we talking about? Are we talking about technologies that farmers can easily use, that comes from their own knowledge systems, that works within their own farming systems, that is affordable? Or are we talking about technologies that are going to further corporate control over farmers and over our food systems to enable further extraction of food and of resources and of finances from Africa? So this conversation around appropriate technologies is really relevant, and we're very excited to have 2 amazing presenters with us today. And I'm going to introduce them now, and then we're going to start with our one presenter who will speak just for 20 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A, and then we'll move to our second presenter. So firstly, to say thank you and welcome to Chifundo Kokwe from Scope Malawi, which is the Schools and Colleges Permaculture Project. And this is part of a regional initiative working with schools and colleges to start food gardens, and well, Chifundo will say more. But it's been an incredible movement that has taken fold across schools across our region, as high up as Kenya, I do believe. And they've done amazing work. And Chifundo is the national coordinator of Scope Malawi, and has been working for more than a decade in permaculture. She's a specialist in permaculture and land design, and she works with schools across Malawi. And she also works with the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, which is a regional partnership of organizations, and is very active in the agroecology sector in Malawi. So thank you so much, Chifundo, and we're really looking forward to your presentation. Our second presenter is Precious Piri from Zimbabwe, who is a very well-known facilitator and accredited professional in holistic management. She has her own amazing farm that she welcomes people to on a regular basis. She's also the steering committee member and Africa coordinator for the Regeneration International, and she's worked with agro-pastoral and pastoralist communities implementing holistic management tools across Zimbabwe and across our region. And she has been very active on the international platforms as well as in Africa. She's currently in Ethiopia with many of our other colleagues, looking at how agroecology can support a shift to more sustainable food systems and address the crisis of climate change. So thank you both for being here with us against quite some odds. In Malawi, there's no power, and Precious is in Ethiopia with very limited signal. So thank you so much. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chifundo. Thank you so much, Chifundo. If you would like to share your...
Thank you, Frances. Thank you, Frances, for that lovely introduction. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen now. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. I am looking forward to having a discussion with you My name, as Francis mentioned, is Chifundo Kokwa. I work with the schools and colleges permaculture in Malawi. So basically we work with 50 schools that are working, 50 schools and communities. So the basic idea is that we teach the children agroecology and permaculture principles so that they grow up with the knowledge, but we also work with the parents around the school so that the children can get food. The sad truth is that in Malawi, children go to school hungry, mostly without breakfast. So if they can learn skills so that they can become food secure, then we'll have reached our target. So that's basically the kind of work that we do. So I was asked today to share a bit of my experience on approaches to water harvesting, low-tech approaches to water harvesting, value addition and processing. So I'm just going to briefly share. I know many of you are from organizations that are already doing some of the work, but I'm just going to share a few examples of low-tech approaches that Scope has been using or we have been using in Malawi. Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges that smallholder farmers face is water. In Southern Africa, in Malawi in particular, we have 3 to 4 months of rain. And this is where most of our production happens. And yet, as humans, we have to eat 365 days a year. That means we need food every day. So production of food requires water all year round. So that's a big challenge. So what options does that leave us with? It leaves us with the big option of trying to irrigate our crops so that we can have production all year round, or limiting that or trying to maximize our production in those 3 or 4 months of rain. So the biggest challenge now with those 2 options, irrigation and limiting our production to those 3 to 4 months, is that irrigation is very expensive. It is labor intensive, and most of our smallholder farmers cannot afford to install really good quality irrigation systems. And in terms of storage of food for the whole year, most of the food does not keep, and we suffer a lot from post-harvest losses. So in the pictures below, you can see this is what a typical Malawian, I don't know about your countries, but this is what a typical Malawian farm looks like around this time of the year, because there's no production, there's no water for us to be producing food. And those 2 pictures on the left, they are just showing few examples of post-harvest losses. Smallholder farmers do not have the technology to keep their food for the whole year. So one of the options that I'm going to talk about here, because like I said, irrigation is sometimes expensive for smallholder farmers, I'm going to talk about a low-tech approach, which is water harvesting. So rainwater harvesting is defined as the management, control, and use of rainwater in situ, that means on site, or its storage for future use. So it comprises of all the rainwater methods by which rainwater and runoff are managed effectively. So we're talking about when rain falls, how do you manage the runoff? And how do you manage the rain itself? How do you store it for future use? So it's the only option that increases the actual amount of water per cropping area and also reduces drought impact and enables the use of runoff. It's a low input technology that smallholder farmers can actually use and is very effective if other factors such as climate, soils, and crops are also favorable. In arid lands suffering from desertification, water harvesting would improve vegetative cover and help halt environmental degradation. So we're talking about the fact that rainwater harvesting also utilizes surface runoff. So this stops erosion and therefore stops in environmental degradation. And one of the most important points about rainwater harvesting is that it recharges groundwater aquifers. In simple terms, if we're using rainwater harvesting, our water tables will rise. So I'm going to share a few low-tech techniques in rainwater harvesting. So the first one I'm going to share is swales. I'm also going to talk about check dams. Some people call them dam walls, some call them permeable dam walls. So it's basically the same thing. And then I'm also going to talk about infiltration pits. Others call them percolation pits, but I'm going to share about all these three techniques. I'm going to start with the simple rainwater harvesting technique, which is called a swale. This word is a buzzword in permaculture. It's thrown around everywhere. But what really is a swale? A swale is a trench. It's simply a trench. It's a trench that we use to irrigate farmland, to mitigate stormwater runoff, erosion, and improve soil quality. So how do we do this trench? As you can see on the diagram, unfortunately, the slope on the diagram is not very big, but you can see there's a slight sloping from left to right. So we dig our swales on contour, on a slope, and the soil from the trench is put on the lower side of the slope. That's where you see the word berm there. So where you put the soil on the lower end of the slope, it stops the water from continuing to go down, and the water stays in the trench. So when the water stays in the trench, it infiltrates. That's why I mentioned before that rainwater harvesting is important to recharge underground aquifers, because the water will percolate into the ground. If you have big trees, as you can see right next to the berm, we have productive trees. Your productive trees can be your fruits, they can be your tree nuts. For example, macadamia, cashew, you can have them there growing. So these will benefit from the water that is seeping into the ground. So within the first year, the water that seeps into the ground, which we call the water plume, will not be as much. But in subsequent years, the water plume will increase. For some who have been having swales for years over time on their land, after 5 or 6 years, they actually are able to create springs downhill because the plume becomes so big and it hits the impermeable surface underground or the rock underground, and it causes the water come out as a spring on the lower bottom, the lower half of the land. So this swale enables us to grow productive trees right near the swale. We are also able to have annual or perennial gardens near the trees. And if we have a large piece of land, we can actually continue to construct swales as we go down slope. The number of swales will depend on how steep or how big your land is. If your land is steep, you have the swales will be closer together. So I will now move on to the next technology, so before I move on, I forgot, we have a picture there from one of our communities actually constructing a swale. So this is the trench that they are digging. So they will, after you construct your swale on contour, you're going to check maybe the first year, the swale might not be big enough, or it might be too small. So you might have to just deepen the trench so that the water just doesn't run over it. So this is a real life example of one of our school communities working on swales. So the next technology So the swale is really low tech. A single person or two people can work on it. Just because there were 10 people in our community working on it, we were just having a practical. So it's really low tech, and you can have two people or even one person constructing it with just a hoe and an A-frame. And then we use a check dam. The next technology I'm going to talk about is a check dam. So the check dam is a long, low structure made from loose stones. Sometimes we can use gabion baskets. I'm sure we all know what gabion baskets are, but these are baskets made from reed or metal where we put the stones. I'm sure we've seen them when they're constructing roads on the roadside. They put stones in these nets or metal frames to keep the stones from rolling over. So this is what we can use to construct our check dams. So the idea is that, so check dams are constructed in a valley or a gully or a place where there's been so much erosion that there's a huge depression that has developed. So the idea is that you are creating a wall to stop the water from just rushing through and causing erosion. So when you create the wall, the water will stop at the wall and the water will sink into the ground at that wall. And any excess water will flow towards the sides. It will overflow towards the sides of the dam. So gradually the siltation and the fertile deposits that are carried in the gully will form a fertile plain around the check dams. And you can actually grow really good food because the soil is fertile, because the siltation and the soil that has been carried has been stopped by the check dams. I will show you a diagram of what a check dam looks like. So that's the first diagram with the sort of wings. We can see the valley floor. There was a gully being created. So the check dam is created to, so you see the stones are put there, and when the water comes from uphill, it is then stopped by the wall. And if there is any overflow, it will flow towards the wings of our check dam. And that is where that whole region will be more fertile, because there's a lot of siltation, a lot of eroded black soil, a lot of eroded minerals in the water, so we can actually grow our food in that particular area. So this is just a cross section on the other side. The orange one is just a cross section of the check dam. Some people construct them without wings, especially in places where you cannot find stones. The check dams can also be made out of sticks and decomposable materials. The only problem is that you have to keep doing these and refurbishing them if you don't have stones every single year or every 2 years, because they are going to decay. I will move on to the third technology, which is infiltration pits. These are used to manage stormwater runoff and prevent flooding, and then also prevent downstream erosion. So this is a shallow artificial pit that is just designed to infiltrate stormwater through into the aquifer, into the water table. So as you can see at the bottom, we have a community there. On the other side that you can see is a road. So the road gets a lot of flooding. So the community decided to divert their storm water into these infiltration pits. And you can see the trees around there. This is an indigenous fruit forest. They have a lot of indigenous fruits in there. So this water is actually taken up by the roots of the fruit trees, and the trees are doing better because of the infiltration pits that have been dug there. So essentially, the idea of an infiltration pit is that the water should actually not stay in the pit, but permeate or infiltrate into the ground so that the underground water table or the underground aquifer gets elevated. So this is, I think, a Manchewe community in one of the communities up north. I did not mention this initially as a low-cost technique because tanks are not very cheap, but for those smallholder farmers who can afford, ferro cement tanks are also a good way. To harvest water. So these are connected to gutters and harvest rainwater from the roof. So on the left, we have just a 10,000 liter ferro cement tank. And in the middle and on the left, these are underground rainwater harvesting tanks. They're harvesting from the roof, but into the ground. So these have been installed in some of our communities by Scope. And so they will use a simple rope washer technique, pump to pump the water from underground. But this is rainwater from the roof. In schools, they get a lot of water, and we can easily harvest that into a 55,000, 60,000 underground water tank. Of course, these are expensive and might be out of reach for the smallholder farmers, but I just thought that I should mention them because they are a great technique and a great way to harvest rainwater. Right, so we also mentioned that post-harvest losses are a big challenge for smallholder farmers. So that's why we need to talk about value addition and processing. So this helps to keep the food for a longer time and reduces losses of food post-harvest. Simple methods of processing food, especially vegetables, include dehydration, fermentation, pickling, and making jam. Pickling and jam making are the least used methods in Africa. In Malawi especially, pickling and jamming, making jam are not very common methods that we use. But the other two that I talked about are very popular. So dehydration, this is just removal of water from vegetables. Sometimes it uses heat, and others it uses heat from the sun, or sometimes they use heat from like fire, smoking, and all of that to dehydrate the food. So in most smallholder areas, this is accomplished by using reed mats and placing vegetables in the sun. In Malawi, especially, you find during after the rainy season, a lot of vegetables are dried on reed mats in the sun. But this is a problem because animals, including dogs and chicken, normally have access to the food, and the food ends up being very dusty, and you can taste some stones even as you eat it. So a low-tech solution to this can be a simple solar dryer. A simple solar dryer uses sunlight to dry the food, to dehydrate the food. The simple technique in the solar dryer is that it allows cold air in and hot air out. As we know from science, hot air rises. So if cool air comes in through the bottom, hot air comes out through the top. And the idea is to keep the inside of the solar dryer dark so that it traps as much heat as possible. And to make the top, either use a clear plastic or glass so that it traps as much heat as possible. So those are the simple parts of a simple solar dryer. You just have to ensure that cold air goes in and hot air goes out, allow space for cold air to come in and hot air to come out, and make the space inside the solar dryer dark so that it absorbs as much heat as possible, and allow for sunlight to enter through a glass surface, a clear plastic surface. So on the left, there is a simple solar dryer that we have at scope for drying our fruit and vegetables. So the only modification that has been made from the diagram is that we have a net shelf inside. So our food doesn't sit on the bottom of the solar dryer, it sits on the net shelf. So we take out the net shelf and then bring it in. So that's a simple solar dryer that farmers can actually use. They might not even have to use a big one, because that small one works for if you have not many fruits or for a standard family. The next popular method in value addition in Africa is fermentation. I'm sure we all know what fermentation is. I'm not going to explain, but I'm just going to say that fermentation is really important because it releases nutrients that might not otherwise be available through the process because the enzymes have worked on it. And in most African countries, fermentation is very traditional, and it provides a means of food preservation, improving the shelf life and adding to the nutrients of the food. I just have here examples of fermented foods that are made. In Malawi, we ferment tuber products. We ferment cassava, and the flour is called kondowole. That has been made from cassava flour. Another popular one is fermented cereal products, where we ferment either maize, sorghum, or millet. And I think this is popular in many countries. In Zimbabwe, they have mahewu. Malawi, we have tobwa, and this is quite popular in most African countries. We also have fermented dairy products, such as amasi, chambiko, in Malawi, hodzeko in Shona. So just out of interest, what is traditionally fermented in your culture or your country? It would be really interesting to know what you ferment in your own culture or in your own country. So I move on to pickling and making jam. So pickles are food that are soaked in brine. Brine is an acidic or a salty solution. This helps to prevent bacteria that might make the food go bad. So brine solutions or acidic brines are made with either salty water, sugar water, lemon juice, or vinegar. Like I said, this is one of the least used methods of preservation in Africa. The one popular product that I have seen and know of that is made using pickling is mango acha. In Malawi, we call it achari. I don't know what you call it in your country, but this is one popular product that is made using pickling. And this is a method that farmers can actually use. Salt is easily available, and we can actually use this method to preserve some of the fruits and vegetables. So this is a method that can actually be used by smallholder farmers, but is not actually being used at the moment. So jam making involves adding sugar as a preservative. So whilst pickling involves using an acidic brine, acid, lemon juice or vinegar and salt, but jam now is the opposite. We preserve fruits by adding jam. Some jams are boiled, others are not. They are uncooked jams or preserves that you can make. So this is another way that we can actually preserve some of our food. Right, I just have some pictures from scope participants adding value to products. So on the left there, we have potato, sweet potato and Irish potatoes being made into either chips or being dehydrated. So they prepared them, chopped them nicely, and put them in a solar dryer so that they get dehydrated and can be kept for a longer time, because potatoes go bad really fast. The second picture is a picture of jam making. I think that was tomato jam. Tomato jam is really good because we have a lot of leftover tomatoes in Malawi that go bad in the market. So making them into jam. We also teach communities how to make tomato sauce and just to pickle tomatoes so that they can use them in times when there's no tomatoes. Yeah, so there's lemon marmalade, a picture of someone holding, and that's us just happily showing our products. Thank you very much. That was the end. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Fundo. That was the most wonderful overview of some of the different technologies available to us. And I think it would be nice if you keep sharing your presentation, actually, so that we can go back to some of those things. Thank you. Really, really interesting. And I think you covered a lot on the water harvesting and then some of the other things we can do with value addition, which is really, really important. And I know we know from across our region is just seeing the mass wastage of food that people can't sell, and everyone is growing the same things all year round. So how do we deal with that on a much bigger scale? And in other countries, things like the pickling, the fermentation of different projects, even things like cabbage in Germany is very popular and is really, really good for gut health. So, and it doesn't have sugar in it then, obviously, whereas jams have a lot of sugar. So we can eat more quantities of fermented cabbage, for instance, than we can of jam. But yeah, so thank you so much. That was really interesting. We're going to open for some of the questions that have already been posed to you. And so the first one was really the excellent presentation on making swales. And to make these, is it really as easy as it looks, or is it more complicated? Is it something? And I've seen them being used more on steeper slopes, also to manage water runoff, so that you can slow water down and get it to sink into the earth. But I haven't seen it done. You did show the picture of it more being used on a flat piece of ground. I guess even when there's no trees and a lot of cover, water runs off when you have that hard pan. So if you could just explain a little bit more about the different uses where they've been used, swales, and also then for directing water, I think, for channeling water across long distances. We know that in some places, particularly I've seen it in South America, they have, and in Europe and Eastern Europe, I mean, Asia, the water is transported for miles using the form of swale technology. So maybe you can share a little bit more on that. You could actually go back to your picture if you can. You're on mute right now, so you can just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, let me try and go back quickly.
It was quite a useful picture.
I can't seem to be able to go back.
Oh, okay. So you can just speak to it for now. Your computer might wake up.
Yeah, it's I can't use any of the buttons. Okay, yeah. So swales are really good. One of the things I didn't show, I hope some of you remember the picture of the infiltration pits. They're actually connected. So they did the infiltration pits because they didn't want them to be too big. That's one example, I think, Francis, you were talking about, that swales can actually connect places and carry water over long distances. So a swale is a great way you can put them on a very steep land, use them as part of to contour your land as well, to hold water over that steep mountain or edge, and then they'll be closer together. But you can also use swales over flat surfaces. I always say that when you have a place that has sheet erosion, where there's no gully, but you can tell erosion is happening, that place needs a swale at the top of the land. So in most schools or in most communities, we have lots of bare land, and there's a lot of sheet erosion happening. And some of the places are not places that want to be used for agriculture, but you can tell there's just a lot of erosion happening. So at the top of the land, we normally recommend that they put a swale, because it's going to hold all that water so that at the bottom of the land, the sheet erosion doesn't keep happening.
Okay.
So those are some of the instances where you can use swales. And the first rule of water harvesting, always start from the top.
Okay. So I think someone recommended that if you unshare your presentation and then you can share again, you might be able to
share it again.
Come back to that picture.
Okay, all right.
That's very interesting.
Trying again.
Are we working?
Not happening. I'm going to try.
It's very interesting, the use of swales, just also to manage erosion, and particularly when we have no cover on that soil, rather than just as usually, which is known for on steep slopes. So thank you for that very interesting clarification. So I think another question just is that I had on the rainwater harvesting is often, particularly in our countries where you get that short, hard period of a lot of rain, and then we have months and months. So yes, I think at schools, of course, we want to actually just ensure that the water goes down into the ground, most primarily. That's our main objective, but also to capture water, particularly things at schools, so that we can use them in food gardens. How long do those water tanks last for? I mean, if you have that big water tank, does that actually give you water for an extended period, or is it used quite quickly?
So when we put water tanks in schools, the recommendation is that they don't start using it immediately, because just after the rainy season, the ground is still a bit wet. It has soaked up the water. And, when they're using rainwater harvesting techniques, the ground is still, there's still quite a high water table. The aquifers are still quite full. So we normally recommend that they start using the water towards the dry season. So maybe around June, July, so that at least the dry season is shorter for them. Yeah. So so the recommendation is not to start using the water immediately, because there's still some residual water in the ground.
Yeah. Okay.
So that means if they start using it a little bit later, they have it for the harsh months.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So then the next question would be, I know you didn't talk about it, but someone has asked around, what is the best way to deal with weeds in no-till gardening? And I know that you didn't talk about it, but it's a big issue because, of course, no-till is a very important technology, but this also often means increased herbicide use. So there are a lot of appropriate technologies that we can use to, different rippers and different things in the soil. So if you had any information on that, it'd be lovely if you could quickly share that.
Okay, so weeds in no-till gardens. Personally, we've been implementing this Andhra Pradesh 10 inches of mulch technique that they've been using in Andhra Pradesh. And that's been amazing at keeping weeds away, because imagine 10 inches of mulch, nothing grows under there. So that's really been very good at keeping weeds away. I know it's really difficult to get 10 inches of mulch, and we've been trying it over a small space, but that's really, really helped. So I think that's one of the very effective things I've seen that can really help with weed control. Mulch.
I think that's really, really important. And I think that's an important lesson that has been learned from Andhra Pradesh, and there's been so much cross-learning. And so, between what's been going on there, I did see another farmer here. She's an ecological organic agriculture leader, Kanangwa Nulab, and she has a farm. And she uses that amount of mulch. And people often ask about ant problems. And she says, when the soil is good and we have that amount of mulch on, there's not a single, not ant, termite inside. And that keeps all the weeds down. So for food gardens, it's a very, very effective way that you can deal with that. Thank you. So I'm going to a few more questions on the Q&A. Just the most important things. Which vegetables are the best for pickling with, in your experience? And maybe you can also just talk a bit more about post-harvest, some of the strategies, the different strategies that people use.
Okay.
To scale.
So onions, cucumbers. Yeah, I don't know whether you'd seen the picture. Yeah, there were different vegetables. Carrots, you can pickle. But yeah, people really seem to like cucumbers and onions a lot. But I'm sure you can pickle not leafy vegetables. So most of the root vegetables are very good for pickling, except the starchy ones. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That is interesting. And I guess so if they're not being pickled, then those others, the leafy ones, it's very easy to then dry them and be able to make those the dryers that you've used. The other question was whether, particularly in the solar dryers, whether it's better to use glass or perspex, clear perspex on the top of the solar dryer.
I found both equally work quite well. In the past, we used to use a clear, thick plastic, not exactly perspex, but really thick plastic on the top of the solar dryer, and that used to work well, especially if your solar dryer is well aerated, so air comes in and out easily. So there's one of the biggest challenges in a poorly made solar dryer is that it condenses. So as long as air passes in and out, there's no condensation from the water that's leaving the vegetables. So that's what you don't want, because once it condenses on the glass or on the plastic, it's going to fall back in the vegetables and they'll start to rot. So you just want air to flow easily in and out. So I've used plastic. I think perspex would work. We've used glass and it works. It all works really well.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. I've seen them made a lot, but I think that the one that you showed had a really good design and was obviously quite simple with the air flowing through it. So that's an important trick to remember when we're building them. Chifundo, there's a chat from Chuma or a question that I want clarification on, but it's something that needs to be just quickly discussed. And I can't quite get the question, but is it the infiltration pits in permaculture net and pan system? So he just wanted clarification on the net and pan system. Could you just share a little bit more to clarify that again?
I'm not really well aware of net and pan systems, maybe. So maybe if anyone else can try and address that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I've not really worked with net and pan systems.
Okay. I think it was whether there's the infiltration pits or if they're the same as the net and pan system, but we can get clarification, so that's fine.
I don't know what those are.
Okay. Is how safe the infiltration pits are for livestock and for children. So I think this is really, particularly in the rainy season, if there's actually standing water there, some of the considerations that need to be taken there. What is your experience on that?
In Malawi, in the rainy season, animals are normally they're closed off because it's raining and there's food growing, so they don't want them to go wander into people's fields and eat everything. So our designs are made by the communities. They decide for themselves where they want the infiltration pits to go. So it's normally a decision made by the community. And sometimes if there's need for it, they make bylaws and say, we're fencing off this area so that we put infiltration pits, or everyone tie down your animal because it's rainy season and we don't want them wandering anywhere. So it really needs to be a community decision. People really need to make a decision on where they want the infiltration pits to go. Everyone should be well aware of it so that there are no accidents.
It probably really goes back to the whole, the concept that this needs to be community scale landscape management. That's what's really important, is we can't just think of it at field scale. It has to be farm scale and whole community scale. So that's a really important thing, and be owned by the whole community, and that people can come together. So I think, again, just speaking about what really are appropriate technologies, are these technologies that actually work for the whole community, that benefits the whole community, and not that are just technological quick fixes, silver bullet solutions that may, really benefit one community member, but are to the detriment of other community members. I mean, GMOs are stated to be technologies. Are they appropriate? What is the impact for the wider community from one farmer using it, and the impact on the rest of the community? So it's important to think of all of the technologies that we're working with within the context that our farming systems are set within. So thank you for that really important point. I wanted to ask, there was a few more questions, and then just on the Gabion baskets, besides stones, are there anything else that you can use in there? I think I've seen sandbags being used.
Yes.
Could you share a little bit more on that, of your experience?
Yeah, so you're very right. I forgot to mention sandbags. Sandbags are really, in most of our communities, we actually use sandbags. There are places where you cannot find stones at all. So people fill the bags with sand, and they stack them up like a wall and create that check dam structure. And sometimes behind the wall, people cut pieces of sticks, and they create like what do you call this, weaved baskets kind of structure using sticks and behind the sandbags to just give the structure some more strength.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting.
So they weave sticks together behind and place the sticks as pegs into the ground.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chifundo. So thank you for that really, really interesting presentation, and for the questions. And there are more still that we'd like to ask you to answer. We are going to try and break and move to Precious, who is presenting with us today from Ethiopia and has been really struggling with signal. So I'm going to move straight to Precious now. I see you have been dropping out, but you're here with us. Precious, are you able to come in? And even if we share your presentation from this side, we were going to have a break of a short video, but I want to quickly move to you, if it is possible, before we lose you again. Are you with us, Precious? I hope so. Precious has been attending an amazing event in Ethiopia. Firstly, with the Healthy Soil, Healthy Foods project, which is an initiative across the continent with the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. And hi, Precious, you're here. I see you unmuted.
Hi, do you hear me? Sorry.
We hear you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it will probably be, thank you. Well done. I don't want to take up any more time. Just if you could start in case you drop out again.
I have to switch off my video because it's a bit of a hassle.
Thank you. Would you like to share your presentation from your side, Precious, or should we do it from our side? Okay. Great. We can see.
Okay, let me do the view thing
At the bottom there.
so that it's yeah. Oh gosh, there it's gone. I can't even see the bottom of this thing.
There, right at the bottom, I think there should be a presenter. You can go to the.
Yeah, and yeah, I know, like the right bottom. That's what I wasn't seeing. I couldn't see it from my screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'm just pulling everything out so that I can reach that. Sorry. I think the Zoom bar, that's where it was.
Yeah.
So
again, appropriate technology.
Sorry, it was blocked by the.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now for some luck. Let's see if we can do this. If I cut off, please just now be here. It will come back. So my name is Precious Piri. Thanks, Francis, for the generous introductions. Here in Ethiopia, working with some amazing stakeholders. All of us are building on message, bringing out the voice of agroecology to the COP27. So it's been really wonderful. So my role for today is to talk about these technologies. Let's just take note of the word landscape, because as I'm so glad Chifundo was really sharing on our everyday uses, and us. So good. Thanks, Chifundo. So good to see you again here online. And then I'm just pulling it over then to just spread it furthermore onto the broader landscape, which Chifundo shared on swales and stuff. And then, so we're talking about some of our grasslands here in Africa. And as you know, most of our land really is grazing land, and where our wildlife also survives. So I'm just going to share a few tools using the holistic management framework. I'll just keep that. If we come to, okay, this slide, I was just sharing a bit of context to say what are some of our challenges in Africa. So I think we all really agree and we embrace the fact that we have lots of challenges around the issues of climate emergency, weather extremes, wildfires, floods, and droughts. So for me, who lives in Zimbabwe, on one end of the country, in one time, there will be floods, and then on the other end, there's no single drop of rain. And then if you go up northern Kenya and the Samburu, they also battle the same issues, and their people depend so much on the vastness of their lands and the productivity for them to take care of their livestock. But then at the same time, we do have lots of solutions that are coming up. I think now more than ever, there's lots of creativity about what can we do. And unfortunately, because I think everything is really done out of context, out of not also, not being aware, I won't even say that people are ignoring it, but I think we all fall short in one or two ways in this work. So some of the solutions don't really resolve these issues, especially when you look at working with communities. Some of the solutions that come leave communities far worse off. So I really enjoyed watching Chifundo's presentation. We have a lot of donor aid organizations that sometimes really leave communities ill-equipped on how they should get out of the situations that they're in. But I'm sure working together, there could be ways of really channeling all those financial solutions into technological or solutions that are also found in the communities. So I'm going to share a little bit about holistic management, what it is. So I know most of the times when you mention holistic management, people think you're talking about she's going to teach us about grazing, but that's not what it is, because holistic management on its own is a framework. It's like when you say, oh, agroecology, and then you think it's, for example, from what Chifundo just said, and you think it's making solar dryers. That's not what it is, right? It's bigger than that. It's food systems, movement, practice, science, and how you share all that. So holistic management in the same way is a framework for making decisions, and these decisions would really help you create specific designs to your place. And then they would also help you bring out the essence and the potential of your place. So in this case, I think we all have to embrace that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions, and everything that we're sharing here today, it's up to each one of us to start the practices and see where things go. So when we use the holistic management framework, it helps us improve our lives based on local solutions that we know and have embraced as farmers, to manage the web of economic, social, and biological complexity. So at the end of the day, the idea is really to improve ecosystem processes upon which our lives depend on, and then strengthening economic drivers, so strengthening every economic aspect of our lives. So there's no prosperity without successful fruitful land, and vice versa. And then at the same time, the stability of communities socially and culturally, all these are connected. They don't, you can't manage or manipulate one of the aspects in this kind of work in hope that everything else will align. So this is just in brief. In landscape management, using tools that are found in the holistic management framework. So I think that's what will clarify things. What I'll share here are some of the tools. So we really manage our landscapes to improve ecosystem services or processes. First of all, our free gift in the form of sun, where we get all of our solar energy, which and especially in the growing season, when our plants are green, because I think like Chifundo, we also have like barely 3 months of rainfall, especially in this part of the country where I am. So you make the most of that growing season, maximizing photosynthesis by green plants. So the more green plants you grow, the more broad-leaved grasses you grow, the better is your ability to capture the solar energy. So we call those plants the solar panels. And then water cycle, which is effective maximization, just the whole cycle of from the time of formation of rain until it falls to the ground, where it goes. And this is all really stimulated by soil cover. I saw a comment about ground cover. You slow down flash flooding, because most of the rivers flow from water that it flows from water that has just rained, and then you see rivers looking like tea. That means all your topsoil is going away. But then when you build your soil cover, you're building your first few millimeters above the soil, slowing down rainfall, allowing your soil to sip much more water and recharging your underground water, which is where now then you get your springs, boreholes. And so this is like water harvesting at a much bigger level. And you can choose to transition, start by having swales, slowing down water while we transition towards using living organisms like livestock to then improve your bigger landscape. And then we have the soil mineral cycle, which is really talking about a biologically active soil where there is a flow of minerals from the plants to the soil to things that are underground. Just that communication that is bigger than all of us. And then we also talk about, so these are all ecosystem processes that we are managing for. Community dynamics or succession, this is really just talking about biodiversity. Any place that is diverse in population and kinds of living things is more resilient. And so these technologies also lead us to being resilient. So to the land restoration tools, and I share all the slides. We'll have some photos for us to just see. So these tools are mimicking natural patterns. I think there's lots of tools, and some of them we just got from my sister Chifundo. So here I'm going to dive in more on holistic plant grazing and animal impact. And Francis, please do help and tell me how we're doing on time. So holistic plant grazing is the actual act of animals eating grass or plants, or so the actual form of chirping using their mouth. And then animal impact is then how those animals behave on that land. How are they moving on the land? This is based on, so the whole holistic management framework is really built on an amazing body of knowledge created and formulated by Alan Savory, a Zimbabwean biologist who spent a lot of his time in the rangelands of Southern Africa. He worked in many national parks, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and so what he observed, so like I wrote there, this is mimicking natural patterns on natural systems. So at the left corner there, at the bottom, you see a photo of large herbivores, which you call megafauna, that graze. And then these animals, as they thrive in the natural environment, they obviously have predators, which are lions, hyenas, leopards, which we call pack hunting predators. And these predators kept these animals, so they influence the behavior of these animals. So that means when they see or sense a predator, which a predator is always there. So for safety, they keep together. When they keep together, they are alert. That's one. When they feel scared, they'll be jittery. So they're always trampling the ground that they're standing on with their feet. And then there's dunging, there's also urination. And then because there are so many and they're in this space, after some time, I mean, it gets very uncomfortable to stay in. Please tell me if you can still hear. You hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Okay, so after some time, they have to move. So when they have moved, especially in the growing season, the place that they have left, that place is recovering. We call it recovery. So the grass is recovering, receiving all the fertilizer and the nutrients left by the urine. When it rains, that soil receives all the water. And then after some time, the animals will come back when everything has decomposed and the food is looking beautiful and happy days again. So this is how our grasslands evolved with wildlife. And so Alan took the same notions in under really like a detailed planning method, which is called holistic plant grazing. It's called holistic because it doesn't only look at the health of the land or trying to grow grass, but the idea is when I put in this tool on this land of mine, mimicking nature, as you can see on this photo and the one at the top, the people and their animals. People herd their animals to influence the behavior of animals while they observe what are the impacts on the land and the health of the animals. So the health of the farmer, because when the animals are healthy, he will be economically stable and not stressed. And then it's culturally acceptable. We are herders from time immemorial. And then when the rangeland thrives, everybody really thrives and any business can thrive. So, and then again, in that sense, because this is a plan in a living ecosystem, so it works with patterns, so you cannot really determine what will happen. So in that sense, this is a plan that you do, assuming that, you know, the chances are I could be wrong. Therefore, I must do it on a chart. And I'm sharing one of the plans that we did with communities. And you just draw the plans working with communities so that they understand and spell out their landscape to see where are all our natural resources, where is our water, where are our grazing lands, crop fields. Every land that has no house in it is basically a grazing land. because animals eat from there. And so all that is planned and divided into paddocks. And in communities, sometimes people have to spell out to say, okay, not be in this area during this time because it's cropping season. And at first, communities may accept the idea of holistic plant grazing because it's a defensive mechanism against animals coming after their crops. So this may cut anytime now. It says my internet is weak, but then I'll come back again. So, and then we plan on a chart so that they are able to follow it to know we are moving from this paddock to that, and the reason why we are moving there, at what time, and for how long, planning all the movements in that intricate manner. And so the importance of doing plant grazing on a chart and with the communities or and that way everyone is a very messy dance, but whatever smells must be celebrated, and therefore when people see the value they will always want to dive in a little deeper and continue to improve. So the recovery period that I spoke about in the beginning differs with each area because it depends on how much precipitation you receive and how often. For example, so if you're from where I come from, very dry, and sometimes there are long spells between each rainfall, and so growth is slower until the plants can actually seed and whatnot. So sometimes if you have enough land, that is, you can play around with at least at the beginning 90 days before you bring your animals back to graze. And again, this is not prescriptive and it's not a standard, but then when you plan on the environment, you always assume you're wrong, and then you're forever a student and you continue to change and alter. In the next years, you may discover that actually 60 days is enough recovery for us this year. Guys, let's move them quick so that every plant gets interaction with the animals so that the grasses can grow from the processes of how they've always grown around animals. So this will always be different by area, okay? Let's, what's going on? Okay. So we've shared on the key insights of holistic management, but I'm hoping that you are getting some of the principles, the main principles. Okay, so community-led efforts. This photo is showing community importance and leadership importance. And at the same time, these leaders, of course, they become inspired by you taking them to places of learning. And we are very fortunate here. We have the Africa Center for Holistic Management, which is the first hub of the Savory Institute. So we usually have that privilege of taking farmers there to go and learn and then come back to where they live and they try out most of these things. So here, usually this thing or this photo with some sort of material on the right with that farmer there, they usually use that in the crop fields when they impact to fertilize soils and then grow and have a bumper harvest. I'll talk about it later in the slides. But in this case, this farmer actually tried it on the rangeland of sorts, but in front of his house, because there are also lions here, and these bombers also help curb that conflict between lions and people's cattle and goats. So he used it just right in front of his yard because at least he'll be there and the dogs and stuff. But in this community, they're actually planning to have more interaction with the land using bombers. And so one of the plans, they want to get things like tents and so that they can go and stay with their animals out in the rangeland and they can really track the changes that happen. And then let's talk about some of the benefits of what I've been sharing with you. First of all is ecological stability, which is improved soil organic matter, improved soil's capacity to capture water. This is a photo from the Africa Center. Look at that beautiful herd of animals and water in, like at the end of raining, actual raining season. And you can see that water, you can literally see crystal clear. Where it flows, you can drink without a doubt. And that can be a stream, and this is where it's flatter, but then the stream is just a minor, it's not very big, it's not a big river, but now we call it Dipangombe River. But then in our nature, we would think, oh, that's not even a river, it's just a little stream. But then because the banks are soft and they are not steep, and there's grass right from the bottom of the river out into the wild. And then when soils have lots of organic matter and growing plants, it improves their capacity to sequester carbon. And I'm not even in that space because I just work on a daily with communities, approaching this land restoration based on what we feel is urgent to us as farmers, but then there are side benefits which are amazing towards healing our climate. And then we go to watershed improvement. So watershed improvement, we're talking about improving a broader landscape so that when it rains, you don't affect the next communities with floods. You capture all your rain, all the rain that will ever fall will be water in your pockets and not necessarily water that you will lose to the next community. And then there's productivity in general, productivity and soil stability, natural resource hosts. And then also you can move from scarcity to the abundance of the landscape. And then I'm sharing just now a few photos. This is in H9 in Wange communal lands, one of their grazing areas that they watched over with so much jealousy, and they grew all that grass. And this was not even in the best of rainfall years. This was 21-22 season, which has been some of the worst. And then this is the Africa Center for Holistic Management. I'm sure some of you have been there, have been to this site physically. And I used to work at the Africa Center full time. And these were some of the monitoring sites that we kept to take photos of how much soil erosion was there in the beginning. But when you apply simple tools that are locally available and people have them, you start to grow lots of grass, and this slows your water, you capture your water, you harvest tons, billions of tons of water into your underground. And literally, you can create a little microclimate, a small paradise in a stressed environment, and temperatures will be cooler here. There's just peace, and you can see wildlife will start to come in. Working with communities, you also create spaces for just and reciprocal relations between people. Socially, people become friends and they share, because some of the principles that we build on this work are principles of, from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking. But then abundance also is unpacked further to not just mean I am well-to-do alone, I'm abounding with goods and whatever, but then it's abundance in terms of I am generous. So it really creates that generosity of sharing. And then also those they also improve. And then we do lots of ecological literacy, because we have to learn and survey our land so that we understand it. Again, I'll say it, this work is not even easy, because it's transformational, and these communities have gone through lots of NGO burdens. Is that a thing? NGO load. And so this work needs you to be present every day, and it's hard work, and that culture of working and sweating for what we will eat and what we will gain is slowly being lost, because there's lots of cheap opportunities that are being offered to people, and people are vulnerable. It's almost a no-brainer that they will go for the simpler stuff. So this is another photo showing two portions of land, a poorly managed rangeland. It's still in the same community, but then here on the left, they have neighbors who kept coming and on this portion of land. So they couldn't really have a strong control. So it's poorly managed because animals came to it every day in the growing season. So in this sense, we are also learning one of the key insights of holistic management. Overgrazing is not necessarily in the number of animals, but it's in how much animals interact with each grass plant in the growing season. So the more they interact with it, the more they eat it or graze it. That plant will not have enough strength and stamina in its roots to grow deep, grow going up so that it seeds and lay up seeds for the next season. This is what leads to desertification and bare degraded lands, which are a problem across the region here where I live, and also pastoralist regions. And so this picture on the left, so we go to with the communities. This was at the peak of growing season to say, okay, let's go and see how much our effort has actually yielded for us. So we did a mini exercise to say, guys, can we calculate or show how much land is needed here to feed 1 unit of livestock per day? So in our sense here, in our case here, a unit is a cow. So everything else will be measured at least according to the cow. In other places where people grow, where people raise dairy, their unit is a dairy cow because that's what will be producing, and that's part of their income. So they measured here on the left. I had to put these yellow dots so that we see, because the people are very 20 by 18 meters, 17 meters by 18 meters, will they fed 1 animal. So that means we need large land to feed the animals that the communities have. And then on this side where it's well managed, here they needed 4 meters by 5 good quality species, and 1 animal would have been well fed. And so is no, okay, all right, we are winning. Let's look at the same pieces of land, like literally about 2 weeks ago. The one that was poor, you can already see the soil, the topsoil, it's out, it's in the oil. On the right, you still have cover, and that's where the animals are actually grazing right now. It's not really like this across the whole landscape. As you can see, there are some bare lands, but then now communities can see that the people on the right, their animals will not starve to death in this hard year. And then this is in some rural land, lots of troubles here, including social stability. But then I have some friends who have been applying holistic management. We did some trainings together with the communities. And so from time to time, they send me some of their monitoring photos. They're starting to grow grasses, and over time, they want to fill in the land and standing grasses. And here is a community.
We need to, thanks. I think we need to wrap up when you're really done.
Okay, all right. And then here's a community here with showing lots of grass that has grown, a river system that is healed, and then now we go to the crop fields where people plant. They use this between 7 to 10 days, depending on how good your soils are, because the main thing is the healthy soil, and we have a tool of livestock again, and the difference that it makes, there's sandy soils that are turned into healthy, productive soils, including mixed cropping, legumes, pumpkins, and different kinds of grains. And you can compare with the photo at the bottom. The bottom guy was hit very hard, and then that one harvested 2 times more than they usually harvest even in a good year. So this was a bad year. So you can imagine how much a difference this made. And then we also did a mini seed fair where we celebrated the harvest, including the seeds that they got from their fields, and also sharing how to preserve these seeds naturally. So we broaden the scope of this work so that people can really connect to what resonates with them while we move towards the broader landscape management. Thank you. That's just it in brief. Well, not very brief, but
that was amazing. And I'm so glad that we managed to hear you through your whole presentation. Thank you so much. That was really, really incredible.
Miracle. I can't even believe it.
Thank you. We've got just under 10 minutes left, and Ralph has been putting a lot of questions in the Q&A that were in the chat box. And it was just a really, really fantastic presentation that gave us we have to think about things. Appropriate technology also means about thinking about long-term management. It's not about silver bullet solutions, which you've really, really spoken to here. And it's, as Chifundo said, working with the whole community, working with the whole landscape approach. These are our most precious and valuable technologies that we have, using integrated systems that actually works with the whole ecosystem and supports ecosystem services, as they are called. And these are actually just the living systems of Mother Earth. So thank you so much. Precious, I think there was one question about just what types of grass can be grown on sandy soils or in riverbeds. And also that whole, maybe you can just speak to the types of grass. I mean, if we're thinking of, for instance, if you had a very degraded area that is just, there's no grass on it anymore, or if we've got alien trees or something that we want to clear off, and so you have a space that then, has been really degraded, how do you start bringing back the different grasses? Do you need to add grass varieties? Do you need to add the seed? Obviously, then you bring livestock in, and their soil and their feet help to break down the soil. Break the soil. And obviously their manure is then builds the soil fertility. But could you just speak about some of the starting about the grasses that we use to try and get those amazing magical pictures that
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Francis. And look, our question, and I'm finding that everywhere it's really being asked. I think one of the beautiful things about nature and the succession that I spoke about earlier is that nature has all her seeds in her. Until the conditions are ready, she will show us what she carries. So sometimes when you implement a management tool, for example, if you put livestock on that land, in one season, you'll start to grow certain types of plants. They may just be annuals or weeds. That means the land at that point is suitable and can carry that in that moment. So the farmer's idea, depending on what the farmer needs and what they're looking forward to, is to then just continue like, okay, this is a good sign. So there's a chance that wherever we see any bare land at all, there are seeds in the ground that are waiting for the conditions to be perfect, and they will germinate. And at times when it starts with grasses, you can start with annual grasses, which seed and then die, and then seed and then die. You want perennial grasses that will have their roots deep in the soil, that they manage to store carbon, they grow food for everyone else who is underneath there, all the microbiology under the soil, but also they keep the soil intact together. When they die, they fertilize the soil, and when they keep growing, so they keep life underneath the soil and stability of the broader landscape. But then those perennial grasses will come as an eventual outcome, for example, because they don't just come overnight. So you may start by growing grasses or perennial grasses that have seeds that are like stones, they're like spears, because maybe the ground will be too hard, and that's what can germinate in the moment. Your target is your rounded, soft rounded seeded grasses, which are also usually broad-leaved. So the seeds are always in the soil. Just our management is needed to activate the potential of the area. But let's say your land is bare and usually there is no situation where there's totally nothing. But in case, again, I can never prescribe how someone can go about it. But the best thing is always define your whole area that you are managing. Take stock, as it were, of what resources do you have, what land is available, what livestock is available, diversity, and how hardy is this livestock, what finances are available if we are to employ other technologies to help where we are, right? And then where do we start given the state of what we have defined? So these are just some guiding, helpful questions that could help. And this is really just from the top of my tongue. And then how do we transition? How do we apply the different tools that we've given in our toolbox? You could then, at that point, also have what we call the holistic context, which is a big vision of values that describes what quality of life you want, and also your future resource base, what sort of land, and what is your contribution to the landscape?
You're cutting out a little
2
bit.
years ago, we finished.
Oh, we've lost you. I think your internet's cutting, Precious. Okay. Sorry, your internet cut out there. I don't know if you're back again.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Just
We had
strategies
one.
of transition.
Okay.
Is what.
Okay. There was one other very important question for you, Precious. I'm not sure whether you were going to be able to answer it with your signal. Oh, I think she's dropped out. So then obviously not. There's been the questions about the disease management, which is really, really important. So I know that this has been worked on a lot in Zambia. So Rolf, you posed that question about in the context of Zimbabwe. And I see that Dorothy from Kusumala is with us, and I know that you've also been using holistic management. So maybe you could also share in the chat box there a little bit about experiences with controlling using holistic management and planned grazing to break that disease cycle, so that we just don't get that the disease load, particularly.
Anyway, thank you, everyone.
Okay, Precious is back. So thank you so much, Precious.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Precious. Thank you. So we're out of time. Sorry, we couldn't answer more questions with Precious. Thank you so much, Precious. I wanted to just go back to Chifundo before we close. And just there's been a lot of questions, Chifundo, in the Q&A box. And so your presentation was really inspiring. Are you with us here, Chifundo? Thank you.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. So I think it'd be lovely to just hear some final words from you. There's been a lot about soil management. Of course, soil management is absolutely at the heart of everything. And we did have our second webinar actually looking at soil fertility management, which is why we hadn't asked you to focus on it today. So those recordings of the previous presentations that really had an amazing array of the different soil fertility options will be sent out tomorrow, and everyone will get the link. South Africa has been attacked by load shedding, as it seems as Malawi has. So Stephanie will upload those by tomorrow. So thank you everyone for your patience. Chifundo, just some final words from you. I think would be really, really great to hear from you. And also maybe just some links to any of the work and the lessons that have come from Andhra Pradesh in India, particularly on this more landscape scale management and appropriate technologies. Thank you. Over to you for a last word.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for the questions. Yeah, I think what Francis says was really important. At the heart of it all is healthy soil. We really need to have our soils healthy. Otherwise, water harvesting is a challenge. Maybe one of the key things that I would also like to add is that water management is community effort. If you do anything on your own homestead, we need to have, you won't achieve much. We really need to look at it on a landscape level or community level, or maybe even several communities working together, because some share the same watershed. So it really needs to be bigger than just thinking as individuals. So this is really important in because you will see that even when you're making check dams, you can't do it as a single person to compile that amount of rocks and to do the check dam yourself. So it really needs to be at a level bigger than an individual level. It really needs to be community effort. So maybe that's the one thing that I'm didn't really mention in my presentation, but is really, really important. So the community has got to be united. The communities have got to be geared towards what they're doing so that they're able to do this. So let's work on landscapes. Let's work with whole communities to transform and water harvest.
Thank you so much, Chifundo. It was really, really wonderful having you on this session, and Precious with us. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, and there's a lot of questions that have not been addressed still. And that's the thing, all of these topics that we're talking about overlap with each other. And at the end of the day, Chifundo, as you say, it is about working at that landscape scale. It's about thinking broader into the systems. This all affects climate change. It affects broader community, how we're integrating with different systems, markets, inputs. All of these things really affect how we then manage our farms at the farm scale, and how we can work at the broader scale. So thank you so much. I'm going to put a link in the chat box to a short clip from the ETC group that talks about what we would call inappropriate technologies, and some of the concerns around the whole digitalization of agriculture. And that's a very interesting clip to look at. And so it just gives context again to say, what solutions do we have on the ground? People have been farming in Africa since the dawn of time. And so let's go back to our indigenous knowledge systems. The knowledge is here within our context. How do we build on those indigenous knowledge systems? How do we reclaim the systems and the natural cycles that used to work, and build on those in order to increase productivity and restore land? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's been wonderful to have everyone here again. And please do join us again next week. We'll be looking at conversion considerations to organic agriculture. How do we get off the poison treadmill and convert to organics and agroecology? So thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you next week, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just show a short video that everyone can just see as we close off. So have a great day. Should be able to see my screen now.
A swale is a water harvesting ditch on contour with a soft contour mound on the lower side. It interrupts the water flow as it comes across the landscape and stops it on contour, perfectly level, and the soft mound on the lower side soaks the water into the landscape, and it plumes it through the landscape as a sponge very, very slowly. This is the essence of creating swales that harvest water in the most passive way and hold the water up for as long as possible, as high as possible, and create the most potential for productivity. The water that plumes down the hill from swale soakage continues to move at right angle to contour very slowly through the landscape. As you set more and more of these systems up, it's inevitable that eventually some of this water hits impervious layers that are almost horizontal. And where they meet the surface of the landscape profile, accumulated water starts to spring out in the middle to lower slopes. This is a way we actually recreate or invent completely new spring lines in the landscape. And that's another set of advantage that we can put swales to use for all sorts of extra water flows and productivity.